But when the Epstein files came out, it turned out that was a lie. You were forced to admit that you had visited Epstein's private island in 2012, 4 years after Epstein pled guilty soliciting a minor for prostitution and was labeled a sex offender. You brought along your wife, your kids, your nannies to the predator's island. Incredibly poor judgment.
A high-ranking official sits under the bright lights of a committee room, but the questions aren't about the budget. They are about a shadow that has followed him for years, a shadow involving a private island and a predator. The documents are out, and the excuses are running thin. Pay attention to what shifts.
Let's start with your relationship with sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. In October, you told the New York Post with colorful narration that the last time you saw Jeffrey Epstein was in 2005 when you took a tour of his house, which happened to be right next door to yours. You claim you and your wife were so grossed out by this disgusting person, you swore you would never go back. But when the Epstein files came out, it turned out that was a lie. You were forced to admit that you had visited Epstein's private island in 2012, 4 years after Epstein pled guilty soliciting a minor for prostitution and was labeled a sex offender. You brought along your wife, your kids, your nannies to the predator's island. Incredibly poor judgment. But that even wasn't the whole truth. It turns out that 5 days after visiting his island, you and Epstein signed a business deal together. As co-investors in a digital advertising company, Adfin, an email showed you stayed in touch with Epstein about this deal as late as 2018. Secretary Lutnick, why did you lie to the New York Post about your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Oh, I did hear that. Please don't repeat your gracious offer to speak behind closed doors, not under oath, without the ability of this committee to question you. The American people wants to know, why did you lie about your relationship with Epstein?
The House Oversight Committee and I have agreed
we
will
the
spend the time
reclaiming my time. I do not accept that answer. We've heard that one. We are our own committee. We have our own reason to test your credibility and veracity. Please answer the question. Why did you lie to the Post?
I have voluntarily agreed to spend the time and talk about it.
I reclaim the time. Let the record reflect you're dodging the question. The cover-up continues.
This isn't just a political squabble. It's a total collapse of the neighborly ignorance defense. Representative Dean isn't just asking for dates. She is weaponizing a paper trail that Lutnick previously claimed didn't exist. When a Commerce Secretary is caught in a discrepancy involving the Epstein files, it calls into question the vetting process of the entire administration. Notice how Lutnick pivots to closed-door offers. It's a classic move to avoid the public record. Is this a genuine oversight of memory, or are we witnessing the frantic shielding of a deeper business alliance? Why is the mainstream media silent on the Adfin connection?
You know what? In your conversations with the president, is the president concerned about your continued relationship that you had with Mr. Epstein as recently as 2018?
I am not going to discuss conversations I have with the president. That is not something I'm going to do.
If you remember in that interview, you said you would never be in the room with him socially, for business, or even philanthropy. President Trump has just fired 3 cabinet secretaries, 3 women, Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, Lori Chavez DeRemer. If President Trump has even a shred of concern about accountability for Jeffrey Epstein's enablers, he would fire you too. Beyond Adfin, what other financial ties do you have to Jeffrey Epstein?
As I said, I'm going to answer all these
Beyond
questions.
Adfin, what other financial ties? You're the Commerce Secretary. We have a right to ask this question and get it answered.
Again, I'm not going to spend the budget day discussing something I've set aside time to spend on this topic.
I'm going to
with your
switch
House
topics.
colleagues.
Let me switch topics. A different and equally disturbing issue, how your family is profiting from your work as Commerce Secretary. Let's start with tariffs. You and the president illegally imposed the highest tariffs on the American people since the Great Depression. And your sons figured out how to profit from the high tariffs by buying up refund rights, pennies on the dollar, just as you were out there cheerleading the tariffs. As a result, federal taxpayers like my constituents may now owe your family tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars. I wonder if President Trump is concerned about you and your family profiteering off the illegal tariffs.
You know that that is false. Here's reporting. I'd like to put it in the record. Howard Lutnick's old firm did not, in fact, profit from Supreme Court tariff ruling. It is just
It's your
not
son's.
true.
It's your son's. The
No,
reporting
his
is
old firm and my son's. It is not
Mr. Chairman,
true.
reclaiming
And you
my
know
time.
it's not true.
I have
it's
asked
not true.
Mr. Chairman, reclaiming about 20 seconds. I hope you recognize how fundamentally wrong and corrupt this is. I hope you take accountability and have the decency to resign before you are fired.
It's not true.
I yield.
Time of the gentlelady has expired.
What we just witnessed was more than a heated exchange. It was a surgical dismantling of a public official's credibility. The moment Madeleine Dean brought up the Adfin business deal signed just 5 days after a visit to Little St. James, the narrative of accidental proximity died on the floor of the House. This is the part the evening news often glosses over, the cold, hard reality of business ties that persist long after a moral line has been crossed. But here is what nobody is asking. Why was a man with these documented connections cleared for one of the most sensitive economic positions in the United States government? Think about what this means if you are sitting on the other side of this. If you are a small business owner subject to the very tariffs Lutnick champions, while his own family is allegedly positioning themselves to profit from those same trade barriers, the system doesn't just look broken, it looks rigged. Why now? That is the question. Why is this coming to a head in a budget hearing? It's because the intersection of personal scandal and public profiteering is where political careers go to die. Supporters will argue that Lutnick is a titan of industry being targeted by a partisan witch hunt, claiming his past associations are being unfairly weaponized. Critics, however, see a man who lied to the press and only corrected the record when the Epstein files made denial impossible. Both sides, however, are missing the systemic issue, the revolving door between high finance shadows and federal authority. If this is the analysis you are not finding anywhere else, you already know what to do. The historical parallels here are chilling. We've seen officials survive policy failures, but they rarely survive the veracity test. When Dean tells Lutnick he should resign before he is fired, she isn't just grandstanding. She's highlighting a liability that even a loyal administration might find too heavy to carry. The mention of the 3 fired cabinet secretaries serves as a warning shot. This story is far from over because the documents Dean alluded to suggest that Adfin was just the beginning. Thanks watching, subscribe, share, comment line in the end.